Howdy everyone, I just want to let you guys know that a new episode of Earful will be available in the first part of January, after a small break for the holidays. But in the meantime, I thought this would be a good opportunity for you to check out Earful's supplemental show, Hidden Tracks. Now, I've mentioned Hidden Tracks before a few times in the last couple of episodes of Earful, but just in case you missed it, here's a brief description of what it is. Hidden Tracks takes its stories from the main episode of Earful, but it's the stuff that was either too far off the main show subject or just a quick tell that ran adjacent to the main subject. Basically, it's just the stuff that I thought was too interesting to not mention, but didn't have any real place in the main show. The episode I'm going to share with you today is a good example of what Hidden Tracks is all about, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, if you do find that you enjoy it and you'd like to hear more, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/earfulpodcast for more information on how to do that. Alright, thanks a bunch. You guys are the best. I hope everyone has the happiest of holidays and a rockin' new year. Just, eat till you can't bend over to tie your shoes and try not to blow any of your fingers off with those fireworks. And I'll see all of you guys on the other side of 2020. Okay, enjoy Hidden Tracks. Love you guys. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Earful supplemental show, Hidden Tracks. Now, in this episode of Hidden Tracks, I'll be discussing a gentleman who had a small part in the career of the Eurythmics. In the main episode, I talked about how their 1983 album, Sweet Dreams, was released to critical acclaim and took the Eurythmics' career to superstar status. Briefly mentioned was the release of a corresponding video album featuring concert footage and promotional music videos. Now, one of those videos was for Eurythmics' 1983 song, Who's That Girl? Unrelated to Madonna's Who's That Girl, which, for the record, came 4 years after the Eurythmics song. So that video was directed by a gentleman named Duncan Gibbons, born 1952 in Cornwall, England. Duncan started his career as a director working on music videos, like many directors before and after him would do. He worked on videos for Musical Youth, Bananarama, Wham, and, of course, Eurythmics. By the summer of 1993, he was coming off the release of his third full-length feature as a director. It was called A Case for Murder. It was a drama/thriller starring Jennifer Grey, but just a few months later, on the morning of November 2nd, Duncan would see a very real drama/thriller play out right outside of his window that would later come to be known as the Old Topanga Fire. Southern California is no stranger to wildfires, not by a long shot, especially in the autumn months. Dry conditions coupled with the fierce Santa Ana winds that the California coastal areas are susceptible to can make for a perfect wildfire recipe. Malibu, in particular, seems to always be on the verge of another destructive wildfire. Now, I was going to list off a couple of examples of wildfires over the years in the Malibu area, but there's just too many. Like, way too many. In fact, as of this recording, in November of 2019, there was wildfire activity in the area. That's just something they see very often, unfortunately. Now, on the morning of November 2nd, 1993, with very dry conditions and high, warm winds blowing up to 40 miles an hour, it was no surprise that the National Weather Service issued a Red Flag Day in LA County. Now, a Red Flag Day is essentially a day where all the perfect elements for a fire to run wild are present. The memory of the last major wildfire wasn't too far removed from the minds of the residents of Malibu. In October of 1978, a firestorm swept through the region, ravaging 230 homes, over 25,000 acres, and claiming the lives of 2 people. One article I read on kcet.org explained that temperatures during that particular fire were so hot, birds who were flying over the inferno were bursting into flame and falling from the sky. It was without a doubt a harrowing time for anyone who was there to experience it. So when a 911 call was made at 10:45 the morning of November 2nd, 1993, to confirm that a fire had been spotted by the water tower on Old Topanga Canyon Road. Authorities and residents alike were on high alert, including Duncan Gibbons, whose home was located on Old Topanga Canyon Road. In less than an hour's time from that first 911 call, the fire had devoured over 1,000 acres of dry brush. By noon, the flames moved southwest into Malibu and several other coastal canyons. Flames 200 feet in length whipped around at 70 miles an hour.
Headline News, I'm David Goodnow. Two major wildfires are burning out of control at this hour in Southern California. Strong desert winds fanned a blaze in Calabasas that has scorched thousands of acres. A second blaze is burning east of Los Angeles in Banning. Many homes were reduced to ashes within minutes as smoke billowed into the mountains.
Over the course of 10 days or so, the fire affected 18,000 acres and destroyed more than 300 homes. It took 7,000 firefighters from more than 450 different agencies coming from 12 different states, including hordes of air tankers and helicopters, to finally put the fire out. When all was said and done, the State Office of Emergency Services estimated that $500 million in total damages were done, including many injuries and, sadly, the loss of 3 lives. One of those lives belonged to Duncan Gibbons. As the flames came roaring down the road toward Duncan's place, he was ready to boogie out of there, but as he left his property towards safer grounds, a sudden worry came over him. He'd forgotten to make sure Elsa wasn't in the house. Elsa was a Blue Point Siamese cat that had shown up on Duncan's doorstep when he first moved in. Now, it's my understanding that Elsa wasn't necessarily Duncan's cat, as much as it was a community cat that favored Duncan's company, and she would regularly catnap in his home. So what if Elsa was tucked away napping somewhere in a cozy corner of the house? She'd be trapped, and Duncan just couldn't let that happen. According to an interview in the November 5th, 1993 edition of the Los Angeles Times, an unnamed friend of Duncan's, the same friend who was responsible for naming Elsa, explained that when Duncan made the decision to go back into his house and find Elsa, he knew it was dangerous, but he believed that he had enough time to do it safely. But as he frantically searched for Elsa, calling her name out, hoping that she'd come to him, the fast-moving flames breached his property and quickly enveloped the house. Duncan managed to stumble his way out of the burning structure, but not before being badly burned. He was rushed to Sherman Oaks Hospital and cared for there until the following day, November 3rd, when Duncan Gibbons would die as a result of the third-degree burns he'd received during his attempted rescue of Elsa. He was 41 years old when he passed. Now, I couldn't help but acknowledge that a man who would perish in a fire had, in 1986, directed his very first feature-length movie, which was called Fire with Fire. And in 1989, the very first feature-length movie that he would ever write would be called Third Degree Burn. Now, I know it's just an unfortunate coincidence, but it struck me as odd and tragic. Anytime the world loses somebody willing to risk their own life to help save another, it's tragic. Now, I'd like to think Elsa somehow knew that Duncan Gibbons really cared for her, as much as I'd like to think that Duncan Gibbons somehow knew Elsa made it out of the fire safely. Because Elsa did make it out safely. The same morning that Duncan passed away, authorities were combing his neighborhood. And when the home he stayed in was searched by a Norwalk sheriff's deputy named Stephen Robinson, he heard, coming from a space amongst the burnt ruins, gentle meowing. It was Elsa, cowering in a charred corner of her once safe haven, a little worse for the wear, but alive. When the fire passed, she came back to her friend Duncan's place. After a long investigation, it was determined that the Old Topanga fire was started by a fallen power line, but it was initially thought that 2 firemen started the blaze. Elsa, as it turns out, she did suffer a few minor burns, including to her pointy little ears, but she was treated at a clinic and released to that same unnamed friend of Duncan's, who planned on caring for her until she was well enough to return to the area around Old Topanga Canyon Road, where Elsa had other friends in the neighborhood. I imagine she was a sight for sore eyes. Thanks so much for listening to another Hidden Track. And since you are listening to this, let me say to you, thank you so very much for your continued support. It does mean the world to me. May you always have an Elsa in your life to keep you company, and a Duncan Gibbons waiting in the wings to keep you from harm. Bye-bye, all.